Hello guys, what's up? I'm Mohammad Fouad, back with the second episode of our drawing program. So, if you don't know, this video is in the following of the previous video, which was about a drawing program. If you haven't watched that, I suggest you go ahead and watch that because today we're going to be completing that. Today, we're going to be adding some features to it, like being able to change the color of our brush, being able to change the size of it, and also using one of the best things in the history of programming, which is object-oriented programming. So today, we're going to be implementing that as well. And that wraps it up for the introduction. And without further ado, let's jump right into the explanation. Alright guys, so before we get into our implementation, let me show you what we've done previously. So here is the program that we've written in the previous episode, and if I run it, you'll see that it's kind of like a drawing program. You have a blank window in the color of white. You can definitely change all these colors and stuff, but here is what I went with. And if you click your mouse and drag it, you see that it draws stuff over here. Wow. And this is basically like half of our project being done. And we can also close it. Now today, as I said in the intro, we're gonna be adding color correction, meaning that we can change the color, changing the size of our brush, and being able to erase things. So to do those, I'm gonna use object-oriented programming and define a class which represents my brush. Now with that class, I will be able to change the color of it, the size of it, and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and implement that. So in order to define a class, as you know, we type class, and I'm gonna call my class brush, and I'm gonna go ahead and define some functions. The first function is the initial function. So init, define init, and I'm gonna give self to it. Now we go ahead and define a couple of parameters like self.size, which is equal to 5, and self.color, which is equal to black for now. That's our init function being done. Now, first thing, I'm gonna go ahead and try to define a function that enables us to change the color. So basically, what I'm doing here is that I have a defined color for my brush, and every time that I want to draw a circle in the screen, I'm gonna refer to that color. And if I want to change the color, I press a key and I go ahead into that class and change that color. And next time that we draw maybe a circle or something, that color will be used instead of the previous one. So if you didn't get it, you'll get it when I complete it. So I'm going to go to the next line and define my change color function. I'm going to give the value self into it and the color. Now, the basic thing that we're doing here is that when we call this function, we're going to give a color and change the color which is in our class. So we're going to change the parameter for our object to something else. And to do that, I'm going to just say self.color is equal to color, and that's it. So now I'm going to define a couple of functions to be able to refer to these values which is in our object. You know, these are local variables, and I can't refer to them unless I use a function to return them. So I'm going to do those. So define color return, give self into it, go ahead and say return self.color. I'm gonna do the same thing for our brush size. So define size, return, and give the value self, and go ahead and say that return self.size, and that's it. So as I said, the next thing is gonna be the ability to change the size of our brush, and to do that, I'm gonna use a couple of keys in my laptop's keyboard. And what I'm going to say is that when you press this key, go ahead and make the size of our brush bigger. And when I press this other key, go ahead and make it smaller. So I'm going to define the function to use to change the size of our brush. So define make smaller, give self into it, and say that self.size minus equals to 3. And we're gonna subtract 3 whenever we press that key from the size of our brush. Now the point is that we want to have a negative size for our brush. It's gonna be an error. So to avoid that, I'm gonna define an if statement here. Say that if self.size is less than, I'm gonna say 4, then go ahead and change the size of our brush. Otherwise, don't do it. So we're gonna do the same thing for making our brush bigger, the size of our brush. So define make bigger, give the self value into it. And I don't want my brush to be really large, because that will not be really good, because the person can make it so big that by only pressing once the whole screen is gonna go black. So to avoid that, I'm gonna define another if statement and say that if self.size, oops, we don't need a space over there, is less than 40, then go ahead and change it. So self.size is plus equal to 3. So every time we add 3. You can definitely go ahead and change all these values for yourself and personalize this program for yourself. So that's our class being defined successfully. Now we go ahead and implement this. So in our main loop, what I'm gonna do is that make a object. So brush is equal to brush class. So in here, we're just making a brush object. So as you can see here, I'm using the black color to draw a circle. But what we want to do is to be able to change the color. And to do that, I'm going to use the color that is stored in our brush class. So here I'm going to pass brush. And for draw circle, I'm gonna change the color to brush as well. And instead of color, I'm gonna say brush dot color return. And as I said, this function will return the value of the color that is stored currently in our brush class. And instead of the size 10, I'm gonna use the brush size, and to do that I'm going to say brush dot size return, and that will use our brush size. Now let me go ahead and run it. Hopefully we don't have any error, and as you can see currently it works totally fine. As you can see, our circles are a little bit smaller, and that's because our size here is not big enough. If I turn this for example to 10 and run it one more time, you will see that our circles are now bigger. So this value over here is essentially going to be the default value for your the default size for your brush. So you can change it however you like. And this one is going to be the default color. Now we want the ability to change all these for our user. So we want to be able to change the color and the size of it. And to do that, we want to check which key is pressed in our keyboard. And for example, if R is pressed in our keyboard, we're gonna change the color of our brush into red. And to do that, I'm gonna define a function called handle key or key handle. So define key handle. Hopefully that's how you spell handle. We're gonna give the value event into it. You'll see in a minute why. And our brush object. Now here, I'm gonna just keep it simple for now and go ahead and make it better and better. But for now, I'll just pass it. Now, as you can see in our main loop, this for loop is gonna look for any change that our user does. For example, pressing a mouse, changing its position, or pressing any key in our keyboard. And the thing that is important for us is change in keyboard. So I'm gonna use that. And to do that, I have to define another if statement and say if event dot type is equal to pagain dot key down. Sorry for my misspell, it's in capital, so key down. Then go ahead and call our key handle function. So call this key handle function. And as you can see, we have to pass the value event. So event and the value brush. So that's good. So now what we're doing here is we are giving the event to this function that we've defined, that which was passed for now. And we're gonna see which key is pressed and do stuff that is required for that special key. To do that, I'm gonna define a couple of if statements. The first one is gonna be if event dot key equals to pagain dot capital K underscore. For example, I don't know, let's say R. Then go ahead and change the color of our brush to red. And that's what I've told you previously. So we're gonna say change color. I apologize, we're gonna say brush dot change color. And here is the function that we've defined to be able to change the color. And we're gonna pass the red color into it. Now I'm gonna just test that real quick, see if there's any error or something. So here now I'm drawing with black, and as soon as I press red, it should go ahead and draw in red, and as you can see, it does. So that's that. Now we just have to repeat this if statement for as many keys as we want. Alright guys, I've defined them, and as you can see, when we press B, we turn our color into black. When we press Y, it turns into yellow. For blue, I've just used L because I've used B for black. For green, I'm gonna use G, and for white, I'm gonna use W. Now the point is that here, we can use white color to erase stuff. So we're not actually erasing anything. But what we're doing here is that we are drawing white circles on top of the other circles. And that would make it somewhat like erasing. So to make that more believable, I'm going to use E, which is the beginning of erasing. And we're going to use that very soon. So I'm going to run our program to show this to you. So this is black. When I press R, it turns into red. For example, G is going to be green. B, L is going to be blue. I don't know if Y is gonna be yellow. And to erase these, I'm gonna just press E. And as you can see, we can erase these stuff. So we're not, as I said, we're not actually erasing, we're just drawing white circles on top of the other circles, but that's how we're gonna do it. Now the only thing that is left is the ability to change the size. And we're gonna just use our key handle, and I'll define them here for you. So if event dot key equals to pagain dot K. So I'm gonna use the numbers 1 and 2 in my keyboard to be able to change the size of my brush. You can use any key you want. So for making it smaller, I'm gonna use 1, and I'm gonna say brush dot size, dot make smaller, and I'm gonna call this function, and this function is gonna make the size of my brush smaller. And the next one is the same thing, but just for making it bigger. So if event dot key equals to pagain dot K2 brush dot make bigger, and let me go ahead and run that. And as you can see, I've got my window over here. When I draw, it's in black. Of course, we can change the colors as we want, as you can see here. And now I'm gonna press number 2 a couple of times to make it bigger. And now I've pressed it and I'm gonna draw it. And as you can see, it's bigger now. Now I'm gonna press 1 to make it smaller and smaller. And I'm gonna also change the color to black again. And now I'm gonna draw it, and as you can see, it's smaller. Now I'm gonna press 1 as much as I can so it gets to the smallest size, and I believe that's the smallest size. And for biggest one, I'm gonna just hit number 2 a couple of times to reach that threshold. So as you can see, my brush is now much bigger. And you can mess around as much as you want, and you can also erase them as I've told you, like this. You can change the color to anything you want. You can make it smaller as you wish, and all this stuff. So that's really fascinating. Alright guys, this is the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed and learned something new. I hope that project is really useful for you. Not really useful particularly, but I hope we teach you a couple of stuff about programming and object-oriented programming. So that's it. And if you've enjoyed, don't forget to go ahead and hit that like button so I know you enjoyed. And while you're down there, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That will help me out a lot, and it's free for you and doesn't cost you anything. So thanks for watching and have a nice day.